What's up, guys? We're back. We got a cool video from residents. As always, I'll link their channel in the description below. This is a daring assault on Russian positions by Ukrainian paratroopers. This will be very cool. I've heard good things about this video. It just came out a couple of days ago. Real quick, my name is Saxon. I go by Vegas here in Ukraine, really. I am currently in Ukraine. I joined the International Legion for the Defense of Ukraine January of 2023. Like I said, I am still in Ukraine. I'm no longer in the Legion. I am a part of a different team currently. Before I was in the International Legion, I was a firefighter and an EMT outside of Fort Worth, Texas. Real quick, guys, I have a lot of people messaging me about not having a unit to go to. They're not sure how to get into Ukraine, what's up with the Legion, how do you join the Legion. I've got a bunch of videos covering most of that stuff, but if you are looking for a specific unit, I know different team leaders in the Legion, in Ukrainian armed forces, not related to the Legion, that are looking for guys. So depending on what kind of job you want to do out here in Ukraine, shoot me an email. I'll message you on Signal, and we'll try to find you the right team. I will shut up and let's jump into this assault.
In Ukraine is not only on land, but also on water. In this episode, you will see several special operations of Ukrainian soldiers on rivers and in the Black Sea, and their participants will comment and tell us the hitherto unknown details of these combat missions. Daring raids on the Dnipro and the Black Sea campaigns of military scouts, sea landings for more than 200 kilometers on boats and jet skis, how Ukraine, having no surface fleet, confronts an enemy flotilla and destroys it in the Black Sea. It's going to be interesting, so let's get to it. First, some information for understanding. The Dnipro River is one of the largest rivers in Europe, with a cascade of 6 hydroelectric power plants, a strong water backbone of Ukraine.
I'll say right off the bat, we've seen very little combat near the water or in the harbor or near Odessa. So this will be cool. I'm excited.
Our borders, it stretches for almost 1,000 kilometers from north to south. The fertile lands of the right and left banks are built on it like the muscles of a giant organism. The capital city of Kyiv and the regional industrial centers of Cherkasy, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and 25 towns and cities in total are connected by our great river. Before the war, it used to supply 70% of the country's freshwater reserves. During the Russian full-scale invasion, the Dnipro became a reliable barrier line that restrained the enemy's advance from the left to the right bank. For the first time, the Dnipro waters were used as a secret weapon against the occupiers. At the very beginning of the war, during the most difficult period. Back then, enemy armored hordes invaded from Belarus through the Chernobyl zone and approached the gates of Kyiv from the northwest. Heavy battles broke out for the capital's satellite towns of Gostomel, Bucha, and Irpin, and on the R02 highway, which runs along the Kyiv reservoir. They managed to capture the towns of Dnipro and Dmytov. The only natural barrier separating the enemy from the suburbs of the Ukrainian capital was the small Irpin River, a right tributary of the Dnipro. It was decided to blow up the pumping station on the Irwin Dam near the village of Kakhovka so that the waters of the Kyiv reservoir would flow into its channel and prevent the advance of enemy armored vehicles. In order to blow up the dam, it was necessary.
It's crazy to me that we still use tactics like this, like they've done for centuries in military conflicts. They're using the land and nature in strategic ways. I just think that's really cool.
Necessary to carry 13-kilogram boxes with a total volume of 1.5 tons of explosives.
Wow.
That is, it was quite a lot. Everything had to be done very quickly, so everything was done in 15 minutes. and the explosion was carried out in 20 minutes. From a 10-meter wide river, the Irpin River spilled over 300 to 400 meters, and this prevented the Russian occupiers from advancing towards the city of Vyshegorod. A lot of enemy armored vehicles got stuck in the flooded Irpin River, and the Dnipro water actually saved the Kyiv suburbs. But later, in numerous battles on the rivers, Ukrainian soldiers had to prove their superiority over the enemy on the water. In March 2022, the Russians seized Europe's most powerful 6-unit Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, located on the shores of the Kakhovka reservoir in the city of Enerhodar. The invaders mined the power plant and turned it into a nuclear powder keg. This is an unprecedented act of terrorism in the history of world nuclear power. To prevent the worst-case scenario, in the summer of 2022, it was decided to conduct a daring military operation. Its maximum task seemed incredibly difficult and risky, namely, to liberate the seized nuclear power plant by storming it with large groups of special forces, but with the light infantry weapons and hand grenade launchers at most, to minimize the risk of catastrophic consequences at the plant. The nuclear power plant is so well built that it is the best in Europe in terms of safety. To blow it up, it can only be done from the inside. If the explosives are detonated from the inside, if artillery, mortars, or even large-caliber rocket hits it, there will be no destruction and no radiation emissions from such explosions. So we were not worried about that. The minimum task of the missions was to reconnoiter convenient landing sites and passages deep into the enemy-occupied coastline, and to gain experience in river landings. To do this, we had to solve the main logistical problem: to get from our right bank of the Kakhovka reservoir to the enemy's left bank, near the city of Enerhodar, unnoticed and as quickly as possible. Landing from the water to the shore is a complex type of combat and tactical action. You need to approach a convenient line undetected.
Damn it! Just trying to catch that AK. I had almost this exact same setup. I had a suppressor like this, but probably an inch shorter, and I had a Romeo on the front rail system, just like this. Same setup.
Undetected. Land as quickly as possible in full combat gear, sometimes up to your chest in water, and be ready to engage in combat immediately. The skipper who steers the boat has a special role in such operations. It depends on him whether the boat with the combat team will arrive undetected in time and exactly where it is needed. All raids across the Kakhovka reservoir, from our side to the enemy's, were conducted at night. Almost nothing is visible on the open water at that time, and this increased the chances of an unnoticed landing. The mission in Enerhodar, the difficulty there was that it was a landing from water that was very difficult to work at night. At the very least, it is difficult to navigate in the water at night. In addition, if you come into fire contact with the enemy, if you do not see your colleagues' vessels, it is very easy to start.
Dude's got 2 American flags. Oh, you can't see it. Right here. He's got 2 American flags on his helmet. Fucking
shooting in the wrong direction, and so on. The task was to approach the enemy's shore, make a sharp approach to the enemy with fire contact, land, destroy the enemy, occupy the object, and gain a foothold there. The dark night, long distances, and the high waves of the wide Kakhovka reservoir, which was 8 kilometers long in this area, complicated the task. The boats of the landing flotilla sometimes got lost. Some were flooded with water, but eventually, the first groups reached the enemy's shore.
First group, check all the firepower on the boats and prepare to suppress the enemy. Water, I'm ground, roger. We've landed. We've started to work in the designated area. Over.
The invaders could not control the entire coastline with large forces, but it was important for Ukrainian reconnaissance groups on the enemy's shore to keep themselves hidden for as long as possible. And for some time, it was possible. until suddenly 2 enemy helicopters took off. 2 K-52 attack helicopters posed a serious threat to the landing party, and especially to the ship's group of boats waiting on the water. So it was decided to stop the
We had one of those helicopters, or one that looked very similar to it, come over us one of our missions in a trench line. That's one of the creepiest feelings that I've ever had, for sure. It's one thing, just taking indirect enemy fire and there's pop shots and, it's, if you get hit, it's kind of random, but something like that coming over that, can see you 100% with all its sensors, even if you're in your little boondage, hiding, curled up in a hole, it's still going to see you, or some kind of heat signature. That's when we were taught to use our emergency blankets, those thermal blankets, and wrap it around us to try to keep our heat signature in, so it's less of a signature for their sensors to see. Now I've actually seen, I have some. I bought some winter, like a winter Ukrainian uniform that has these thermal inserts. Sorry, that's me, not you. Throughout, to keep the heat in and keep your thermal signature low.
operation in return. On their way back, the Ukrainian groups opened fire in the direction of the landing point to prevent the enemy from pursuing them. At that time, it was not possible to liberate Zaporizhzhia, NPP, but such risky raids near Indahodar provided the scouts with a lot of operational information, and most importantly, experience in landing operations on the water. The enemy was destroyed in the areas where we landed. Of course, we wanted more, but we accomplished the task set in that square by 70%. After the liberation of the entire right bank of the Kherson region in November of 2022, including the only regional center previously captured by the aggressor, the fighting on the water in the lower reaches of the Dnipro River resumed with renewed vigor. We had to push the enemy as far away from the river as possible, deep into the left bank, both to protect the liberated Kherson from constant artillery shelling and to create a bridgehead where we could land large military groups in the future. Despite the winter season, active military boat raids between the numerous islands on the Dnipro River continued in the Kherson region. We have all realized that water is a completely different element than land. Everything is different there, and it makes its own adjustments. There, you get into a boat and sail, and APCs and grads are working on you, and just like they worked on us. But our soldiers went forward and landed on the enemy side. Downstream from Kherson, before it flows into the Black Sea, the Dnipro River forms a delta system, branched into several water branches with numerous straits, bays, large and small islands, a kind of water maze. It was necessary to expel the enemy from there and take possession of them so that we could move on to the left bank. Here is one such raid on the islands of the Kherson region. Soldiers armed with a...
That's just straight up like a civilian speedboat / fishing boat.
Here is one such raid on the islands of the Kherson region. Soldiers armed with assault rifles, machine guns, and several grenade launchers land on one side of the islands of the Dnipro Delta. They move through the countryside, where outbuildings are burning, go ashore, and suddenly come across enemy fire. The group engages and retreats. They had to overcome a water obstacle, a small stream, wading into cold water up to their chest, and under enemy fire. Come on, Max. Max, take it. On January 24, 2023, near the occupied Nova Kakhovka, near the village of Dnipro, fighters of the Special Forces of the Delta Intelligence of Ukraine, together with Russian and Belarusian volunteers, conducted a daring night combat operation. The target of the fire attack were Russian paratroopers, who had set up their company command post at one of the recreation centers on the very bank of the Dnipro River. Under the cover of night, the military scouts on 4 boats stealthily crossed from the right bank of the Kozak and the Rishaysk rivers, under the cover of the islands into the Dnipro, to the enemy's location on the left bank. The soldiers quickly and quietly landed on the bank, which was mined with anti-personnel mines. The skippers stayed in the boats. The Russians were caught off guard and missed the approach and disembarkation of the Ukrainian assault groups. The attack was sudden, and the wall of dagger fire was devastating for the enemy. First and second, suppressed there. The main building of the base was set on fire by grenade launchers. In total, 12 occupants and their armored personnel carrier were destroyed. The airborne assault was supported by artillery fire. A reconnaissance drone from above captured an epic picture of intense fire along the river, along which boats and scouts were sailing back and returning fire. They had 4 wounded. Everyone is out. All our guys are in the boats. Great. Then let's move on. We have carried out a lot of river landings of special purpose reconnaissance groups to conduct ambush operations, destroy the enemy, sometimes to conduct diversionary landings to hide the directions of the main attacks by other groups, and so on. Fearing a large-scale summer offensive by the Ukrainian army in the south, on June 6, 2022, Russia committed an unprecedented crime of ecocide, destroying the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant with a pre-planned and executed explosion.
Remember that.
The 205th Separate Motorized Rifle Cossack Brigade of the Russian Army, which controlled the hydroelectric power plant at the time, was directly involved in the terrorist attack. The explosion caused the catastrophic destruction of the entire hydroelectric power plant, and millions of cubic meters of water from the Kakhovka reservoir rushed down the Dnipro River, flooding numerous villages and towns. It is a fact that this was a purely terrorist act that led to a man-made ecocide disaster and human casualties. If they wanted to flood the area and thus disrupt some of our river landings, well, this does not justify such vandalistic methods. Indeed, if the Russian invaders wanted to prevent a major offensive by the defense forces in the south by blowing up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, they miscalculated, because after that, the activity, effectiveness, and success of the Ukrainian army's actions on the Dnipro River only increased. Rapid and daring boat raids on Russian positions on the islands, the destruction of enemy boats from the air by FPV drones, and intense, accurate artillery fire only increased. We realized that the enemy was poorly aware of the situation. We moved into the enemy's territory in the interposition space, where several intense clashes with enemy observation posts immediately took place. Some observation posts were almost completely destroyed or captured. Thus, the Special Forces conducted another successful operation, landed on the left bank near the village of Kazachi, destroyed part of the enemy reconnaissance group, and captured another part along with the senior officer, the commander of the enemy battalion, Major Yuriv Tomov. From him, the Ukrainians received detailed information about the Russian defense lines on the left bank. Where are the meeting and eye positions? Meeting is here, and eye is here, in my opinion. Where is the spear position? Yura, draw us everything correctly as possible. Well, the spear is right here. A captured commander. That's cool. In a few days, the enemy realized what was happening, but they could not change the situation on the battlefield. The road was captured. A large bridgehead was captured on the territory of the left bank. Not only the islands, but the land on the left bank with places for landing. The defense forces were later able to use this information to gain a foothold on the left bank of Kherson and then land on it with significant forces. They managed to create a full-fledged foothold in the area of the village of Kanki, Poma, and Pishchemnivka. Since then, the initiative here has belonged to Ukrainian soldiers, and the Russians have no longer thought of crossing the river, but instead constantly attacked the bridgehead, unsuccessfully trying to at least throw Ukrainian troops back into the Dnipro. At the same time, battles for dominance in the Black Sea broke out. We talked about special operations and the battles for Snake Island and gas production platforms that Ukrainian regained control of in previous episodes. Watch them if you missed it. Also, Ukrainians' military intelligence and naval forces were able to achieve significant success in hunting down enemy ships of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. At the beginning of the full-scale aggression at sea, we started our actions by defending our shore directly on the shore. When we saw the ships from the Russian Federation approaching Odessa almost closely from the first days. Now the strategy has changed, thanks to the actions of the armed forces and the Navy. We are defending our coast, starting from the Crimean coast, which is controlled by the enemy. Naval drones, unmanned combat drones of various types, have become a game changer, a factor that has dramatically changed the battle for the sea. For example, the Magara V5 unmanned maritime strike drone. It is 5.5 meters long and 1.5 meters wide. The draft is 40 centimeters. At the moment, you can see the following picture, that most of the ships of the Russian Black Sea Fleet are in the bays. Only a few that have left the bays are relatively close to the shore. None of them at the moment are sailing calmly at sea. Of course, we are constantly monitoring our targets. The commander of a military intelligence...
Damn, look at all those. That's cool, man. Pretty much just fill that bitch up with some high explosives, send it into the middle of a Russian ship. Fucking camera's all blurry, dude.
Maritime drone unit proudly recalls his first major target, namely the enemy fleet reconnaissance ship Ivan Kurs. Its maritime hunters find him at dawn on May 24, 2023, in the far offshore zone, 140 kilometers from the Turkish Bosphorus Strait. Ivan Kurs' crew slept a little bit because we had some problems during the attack. We had to go in 3 times, and only on the 3rd time they started shooting at our marine drones. Despite the enemy hitting one of our drones, another one managed to break through to Ivan Kurs and successfully attacked him in the port side and the stern. Though the enemy vessel remained afloat, it was severely damaged. We have a good understanding of how to maneuver, what angle to enter and from which side. We evaluate a lot of factors before we attack. After reconnaissance, a detailed search for the target. Once it is found, our drones move to a favorable position and launch a simultaneous attack with all sides. On September 14, 2023, the next prey of the military intelligence sea hunters was the patrol ship Seri Kotov, which also tried to shoot back, but in vain. The warhead of this particular drone is 250 kilograms of explosives. It made a hole in the enemy ship with a diameter of 1.5 meters.
Wow.
And the ship immediately heeled to the stern. The most successful attack for the maritime drone unit was on November 10, 2023, against 2 Russian landing boats, the Cerna and Akula projects, in a bay in the city of Chornomorsk in the western Crimea. There, a flock of 4 Magura drones managed to sneak up on the enemy vessels at night and sink them right off the pier with powerful strikes. This happened for the first time in this war. Well, no one could have predicted that we would be able to boast not only of sunken landing boats with armored personnel carriers on board, but we would also be able to boast that even the pier had sunk. Unmanned systems are the future. We have many modifications of drones, and we have ready-made pilots whose experience is constantly growing. In addition, we are using new means, which means we are improving, and at the same time, we are not losing our people, which is the most important thing for our country. In the winter of 2024, the Group 13 Special Unit of Military...
There's drones being used now. Well, I don't know if they're officially being used or not, but they are completely autonomous. Basically, they take off on their own, they move into enemy territory on their own, and they detect enemy targets on their own. And the only human part of this process is basically selecting kill or not, attack or not, right? Like it automatically finds enemy target, and then the human would have to like basically confirm that's an enemy and then press attack. But Skynet, man, Skynet is here.
Intelligence conducted 2 more brilliant operations. Their results exceeded the most optimistic expectations. On the night of February 1, at the raid on Lake Donaldsnov, near the occupied Crimea, 6 strikes by Magura B-5 Marine drones sank the Ivanovets missile boat of the enemy Black Sea Fleet with a crew of 40 soldiers. It went down with its nose epically above the water. And 2 weeks later, on February 14, the Sea Hunters from Group 13 hunted down an even bigger prey, a large landing ship, Caesar Kunikov, with a crew of 90 Russian sailors. The vessel was carrying military cargo from Novorossiysk to Sevastopol and was attacked by a swarm of Ukrainian maritime drones in front of Alupka. Powerful explosions after 5 precise hits on the ship's hull turned it over to port and eventually dragged it to the bottom. Keeping in mind the sad fate of the cruiser Moskva, which was sunk by Ukrainian Neptune missiles, and constantly being under successful attacks by naval drones, large enemy ships have actually left the northwestern part of the Black Sea. These are preparatory measures for our major operation in Crimea. This is a verification of the accuracy of our intelligence data on the routes of approach and departure from there. The withdrawal of enemy ships into the bays allowed Ukrainians to get closer to the coast of Crimea, and even sometimes to conduct daring landings of reconnaissance troops on the peninsula, thus testing the vigilance and density of enemy defense. One of these daring raids was carried out by Ukrainian special forces on boats and jet skis covering 200 kilometers by sea. At night, on August 24, on the Independence Day of Ukraine, for the first time since the Russians seized the Crimean Peninsula, the scouts of Timur's unit planted a Ukrainian flag on it. "We are already in Crimea. The special forces are working." The scouts are already there. The operation was codenamed Force Awakens. It was carried out near the settlements of Olenivka and Mayak, on the westernmost point of Crimea, Cape Tarkankut. The special forces engaged in a battle with an enemy unit of radio engineering troops, destroyed manpower and equipment, and quickly withdrew without losses. The occupiers were very nervous, and there was a reason for that. Because the day before, on August 23rd, a modern Russian S-400 Triumph air defense system was hit in the same area of western Crimea. Its epic triumphant explosion was captured by a reconnaissance drone camera. Russian air defense system S-400 Triumph. Target detection range 600 kilometers. Number of simultaneously fired targets 36. Number of simultaneously guided missiles 72. Maximum height of target impact 30 kilometers. Maximum target speed 4,800 meters a second. Having pierced such a wide hole in the enemy air defense system in Crimea in September 2023, the Ukrainian Defense Forces began destroying key Russian military facilities on the peninsula with missile strikes. First, 2 British Storm Shadow missiles, fired by Ukrainian Su-24 bombers, hit the Sevastopol Naval Shipyard, where the Rostov-on-Don submarine and the Minsk-Large amphibious assault ship were hit in its repair docks. Both enemy vessels are beyond repair. Then, on September 20, the 744th Communications Center of the Enemy Fleet Command in the village of Verkhnyosadov near Sevastopol was hit. And finally, 2 Storm Shadow cruise missiles also destroyed the symbol of Russian power in Crimea, the Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Sevastopol.
I remember that too.
The missiles entered it like a knife into butter, and the powerful explosions destroyed many enemy officers, which the occupiers tried to hide. Finally, thanks to the successful ousting of the Russian fleet from the northwestern part of the Black Sea, Ukraine managed to achieve a significant economic breakthrough by establishing a new export-import transport corridor from the ports of Odessa to the Turkish Bosporus Strait, which is so important in this difficult time. Friends, please subscribe to our second backup.
Definitely sub to these guys and their backup channel or whatever they're talking about. We love their content. This is Resonance. They do a bunch of this, these like Ukrainian military specials, but they dub them in English, and it's it's good for us, right? A couple things about this. I don't have a ton of input on naval warfare because I don't know anything about it, frankly. So what you're learning, I'm learning too, most likely. This is very cool, though. There's something about a few $1,000 naval drone taking out a multi-million, if not billion-dollar Russian warship. That is so cool to me. I love that. Also, I wanted to mention this. We're seeing a lot more in this conflict, the idea of drone swarms, right? Drones have been around since the beginning of this war, but drone swarms now. And from my understanding, you'll have like, let's say 5 or 10 drones, but they're all operated, all their GPSs are synced, and they're all operated on basically by the same brain. So somebody could say, okay, from their operating device, this BMP, and they'll select the BMP, and wherever these 10 drones are, they'll all just, right? And it sounds like they mentioned a couple of times swarms of these naval drones. So I would imagine, I don't know if it's the same deal, if they're all operating on the same brain, or if they've got like 6, 7 different drone pilots for these naval drones, and they're just, all operating and moving towards the ship at the same time. But the idea of synchronized drone swarms, fucking crazy, dude. Like, that's actual Skynet shit. With that said, sorry my picture's a little blurry. I just recently moved locations in Ukraine, and I might be using the wrong webcam. I have a couple of them. I might have hooked up the wrong one. But please like, share, subscribe, all that shit. Thank you guys so much for all the love lately. If you've stayed this long into the video, drop a comment for me. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next one.